Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where last episode we got the tech in order to complete our current viewer contract, which is, just as a bit of a refresher here, to send a satellite into stable orbit around Kerbin, an unmanned satellite that can generate power. We added on the generate power constraint, but we should be able to do that now, right? Yeah, we have electrics researched, so we can hop into the VAB and we can just get that built really, really easily here. So, we're just going to modify our existing orbital science machine, which this is going to need a rebuild after we're done with this. But we can modify this and ditch basically everything above this line. So everything here we can get rid of, and we're just going to use a Probodobodyne Staputnik as the only... or we do have access to the Probodobodyne Octo. Do we want the Staputnik or the Octo? The Octo weighs 0.1 ton. The Staputnik is lighter. So we may actually want to go with the Staputnik, but it either way isn't really going to fit onto this size of tank. So there's some of that going on. Do we have an adapter for it? We could check to see if we have... I don't know if we have any of that sort of tech yet. No, we don't. Okay, so... we could just use a Probodobodyne Staputnik. I think that's fine. It's reasonably thematic for the first satellite. Although this is a kind of wild-looking satellite, no doubt about that. We can have this be mounted or unmounted. We're going to have it be mounted. And we are then going to have this be colored dark. And the pug is... I don't really like these options. Yeah, all of these options are kind of bad. So we're going to have to do something like this. And we're just going to have this be basically swapped in color. Cool. So we'll do something along the lines of that. There we go. And now, of course, we need to be able to generate power. We also want to have some amount of electric charge. So I'm going to toss a Z200 on there. And then for our power, we're going to toss on, like, quad photovoltaic panels, just so that we definitely have something in sunlight. Something kind of like that. That should be reasonably fine. This should get into orbit without any problem. We'll have lots of spare fuel. We could get into a reasonably high orbit, in fact. We don't need any particular orbit looking at the contract, only a stable orbit around Kerbin. Okay. So we can save this not as the orbital science machine, but as the Staputnik. Beautiful. And we'll save that, and we can launch this. So this will complete the contract for only 5,000. Very, very cheap indeed. We may want to toss in a high gain antenna on here. Let's see here. This is a range of... okay, antenna rating of 20. So this would be the antenna to use. Okay. We're not going to have multiple of them, only the one. And we would put that about... actually, I'm going to put it on the other side here, so that this way the offset mass helps us turn in the gravity turn direction. I hope. If I'm thinking about this correctly, which I think I am. Does this have any sort of an SAS on it? The Probodobodyne Staputnik? I don't think it does it? In which case we may be better off with the Octo, but I'm going to stick with the Staputnik. I want to check in here. It does have a transmitter, but we're going to get a better one. I don't think the high gain antenna does relay. And yeah, I'm not seeing any sort of reaction wheel in here. So we would want to have a small inline reaction wheel on here as well. Something along the lines of this. How are we looking for a part count? 23 out of 30? Sounds good. I'm reasonably certain we don't have any relay antennas. Actually, this is a relay antenna. Never mind. Cool, so this is actually going to work as a rudimentary ComSat too. Okay, let's go ahead and save this and launch. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. I hope I'm not forgetting anything anyway. If we go up through the atmosphere too quickly, we may have our solar panels burn off. That would be problematic. We'll see how that goes. This would be a good reason to have a fairing, but we don't have fairing tech. So, no operational SAS module and no pilots aboard. What? The Staputnik and the reaction wheel should count for an SAS module, right? Maybe not. Without SAS, we're definitely going to need to revert that back. So that's interesting. I would have definitely expected this to function, but I suppose we could drop the Stay Putnik and go for the Probodobodine Octo. I would prefer the Stay Putnik, but the Octo should work fine here. I'm going to, due to the size of these, I'm going to, well, we're going to do this. There we go. Something along the lines of that. I suppose we could put like a hemispherical fuel tank up here. Would that draw out of that? It'd be interesting to have that as like an aerodynamic, right? So we do have access to this guy. And that would shield some of this in theory. I don't think that we'd have a problem pulling fuel through these components. I think that would work. It would also be reasonably heavy, of course. And it looks kind of weird. So maybe we'll just get rid of it and go up like this. No, actually, I want it. I want it here. We're going to make it be dark, and this is like an extruded module. I kind of like that. It's really wacky, no doubt about it. But it's definitely going to be a little bit more aerodynamic, and it'll maybe protect some of these parts. I doubt it, but maybe a little bit. That would be the argument anyway. The real question is, yep, fuel does flow through. We can tell by this going up. Cool. So this is going to have enough fuel to get to a lot of, in theory, somewhat distant locations. Like, this should have more than sufficient fuel to reach Moon and Minmus, I would think. So we may be able to use that to complete our Moon flyby mission as well. We would need to gather scientific data, but of course, we would be perfectly happy with putting on a thermometer here. We want to put one on for contracts anyway, except that we don't have access to those contracts. But we would put on something like that. And probably I would put it on this side. Or maybe we just try to offset the weight. It's not going to fully offset it, I don't think. But something like that. In theory, that should work with SAS. I don't know why the Stay Putnik wouldn't. That was a little strange to me. I don't usually use the Stay Putnik, though. So maybe it's just something endemic to that particular pod. But the Octo should definitely allow us to do this. Yeah, we can engage SAS. So that looks good. And we're ready to launch this thing. Off we go. We want to hop over into maneuver mode. We're going to need to get our maneuver upgrades fairly soon. There's no doubt about that. Moving at about 80 kilometers per, or rather meters per second. 80 kilometers per second at this point would be insane. That would be quite the thrust to weight ratio. No doubt about that. But let's just get ourselves some horizontal speed here as we continue to punch up through the atmosphere and get through the thicker portions. Hopefully we make our way up quickly enough that we are not going to have too much in terms of heating effects. Whoa, this thing's trying to flip on us. Okay. I'm able to hold it, but this thing is really trying to flip. Okay. This is very spicy. It's taking full concentration to hold attitude here. Trying to pull us back onto the 90-kilometer marker. I don't know why this lost attitude like that. I'm guessing it has to do with the asymmetric drag. But we were able to hold it there, luckily. And our apoapsis is really, really low. Probably because of that. Okay. And this wants to spin up over this direction. Well, now, this isn't going so well. I wonder if it would work better without this hemispherical liquid fuel tank. I think that's very likely. Once again, though, we know that we have an underpowered first stage, right? That's pretty much a guarantee. But I think our apoapsis is low enough that we are probably just going to end up having this fail. Is my guess. We can try dropping this tank and seeing how that goes, but I was definitely not expecting it to want to, like, it just drifts like this. We're able to get it under control, but that's a little wild, right? I'm guessing it's due to the high gain antenna, is my theory. But we really do need some altitude here. So just park it around here. We're trying to get ourselves altitude. We have lots of delta V, so this might actually be a success, but it's a it's a kind of failure success. That said, this is definitely the chewing gum and duct tape sort of thing that you would expect in a race to orbit. We're getting our apoapsis up high enough and fast enough that I think we're okay. But we're going to need a lot more horizontal speed. That's pretty clear. We need a lot of vertical speed, but I'm going to head back to the horizon now. Our vertical speed is nearly good enough. In theory, once we're out of the atmosphere, this control issue won't be a problem. But yeah, that first stage was definitely underpowered for this. I'm going to look at addressing that when we build our next model of the orbital science rocket. We've got plenty of delta V here, though. I'm not concerned about our DV. But once we address that a little bit, that'll be pretty decent, really. Like, this has so much delta V in this stage. We're going to make it to orbit, for sure. This is actually more to do with the offset thrust, or rather the offset mass from this, and the lack of gimbaling on the pug, isn't it? I bet you that's what it is. Okay. We're hitting space as of now. Beautiful. And I guess we'll just target that 100-kilometer orbit. So yeah, I'm like 100% certain that it's the lack of gimbaling on this pug that's causing a lot of that. Although that doesn't explain the ascent stage. The ascent stage is probably just due to the offset of the high gain antenna. But we can go ahead and extend our high gain antenna here. Excellent. And we're just coasting our way on up here. We are very, very close to orbital velocity. So I want to coast until we are at least 90 kilometers here. So this was definitely a spicy ascent, and that could be worked on. No doubt about that. But this is good enough to complete our contract. Just need to hold this attitude here for a bit. We don't need to be in any particular orbit, and we're not technically in an orbit right now. Our apoapsis went up a lot there. I burned that a little early to be sure. We're going to go up to around 130 here. And let's commence this burn once more. There we go. We're now officially in a stable orbit, and that is our medium difficulty contract completed. So we are going to get 50,000. Excellent. So, cheat menu, 50,000 for that contract. I really wish there was a 10,000 button. Okay, so we know that this is going to need to be 290 at this point, so we can just mash this until we get to 290. Beautiful. And this is not the best orbit I've ever seen. That first descent stage definitely needed work. So, let's head on back to the Space Center. And with that cash, we can not really do too much right now, but that was a very valuable mission for us. Let me move that over to the completed column in our contracts. Fantastic. And that puts us at 1 out of 2 accepted. I'm not going to accept a new contract just yet this episode. We've got other work to do. So we're going to head into the VAB, and we're going to open up our orbital rocket. I do want to add in an additional, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I want to add in 1 additional fuel tank here like that. What would that put this thrust weight at? A little low, but I feel like that's reasonably fine. Okay, we'll call that good for now. I'm super not happy with the control surfaces on this. I feel like just having like Delta Deluxe winglets would actually help a lot. So if we ditch the basic fins and put on, say, Delta Deluxe winglets, we would want to check our aerodynamic overlay and our center of mass, which apparently the aerodynamic overlay is refusing to turn on. So we would need that to be like all the way up here, which is kind of wild. But I would probably lower it down. We can see how it goes like this we're not going to see right now, but we can see how it goes like this. It's probably way too much on the control level, but we can save that and open our orbital science machine. This needs to be reworked a little bit. We still only have access to the FLT200s. I do want to grab an additional 2 here, like we did before, and I want to ditch the basic fins and upgrade those to being, instead of stabilizers, we want them to be, oh, that's so much better with our extra mass up here. We want these to be control surfaces. Okay, so we're going to make these dark. There we go. And we're going to be ditching the command pod here. So we'll ditch that. The drogue chutes went with it, and I'm aware of that, but we want our P re-entry module here. Now, this does not have in it any sort of SAS. So we should definitely put in a small inline reaction wheel. But it is a 2-seater, and we can do something kind of like that. I want to check here. We've got this decoupler here. Presumably there's a heat shield under here. Yes, there is. Okay. I don't think we need to put anything new into the service bay, do we? I mean, we could put in a KER. That's a theoretical possibility, a computer flight unit. We could put that on the bottom here. It might get blown up a bit, but the computer flight unit is quite cheap at $150. So that would go in something like... That didn't actually attach, did it? No, it did not. Okay. Come here, you. Any moment now. This is proving difficult. Let's detach that. And it wants to attach like this. Okay, that's really awkward. There we go. We do it something like that. Now I want to move it up a bit. There we go. Hopefully now it's not clipped down too far. It'd be not super awkward if we lost it, but not amazing, to be sure. So, let's close our service bay. Now, we need to be able to get down to deal with some of this stuff. We can definitely fly down with our EVA. That's theoretically fine. Indeed. We're going to need some drogue chutes on here, and we're at 31 out of 30 parts as it is. So, we're going to need to make some additional changes here. Specifically, our mass is not a problem. We would need to upgrade our VAB if we wanted to have this fly, and that is something that we need to do. Does this thing have the range to do a moon flyby? I'd be a little surprised by that. 225. Okay, that's spicy. And none of these were able to select. Okay. So, 225, huh? How much would we make for that moon flyby? That is a lot. We would have to return to Kerbin. Uh-huh. That would be a lot indeed. A little bit more fuel here, though, and we might be able to pull it off. We toss in like a T100. And we check to see... 1800? Our thrust to weight on this bottom stage is still probably going to be problematic. Cost us 16,000 to launch. We could power it up with things like thumpers. Those are very mass intensive. So that would bring us up over our mass limit, which would mean that we also have to upgrade our launch pad. We could probably get away with going down to 3 Delta Deluxe winglets. So that would end up being something more along the lines of this. That would save us 1 part at 31 out of 30. It's a theoretical possibility. The real problem here right now is lack of drogue chutes, right? So we would need to save a couple of parts. I do want to get a couple of drogue chutes on here, at least 2. Something like this. Should be okay-ish. So, how do we save the parts? Well, I think that the way that we do that is we don't. I think that we simply do the upgrade. it's going to be painful in terms of cash. No doubt about that. I also think that we need to go into our administration building. We definitely need to do... Let's see, we don't need a bailout grant, do we? We need to have our... Takes funds income, yields reputation. This is what we want to set up here. So we need to set up a 25% commitment on our fundraising campaign. Okay, so we'll set that up. That is fine. Cool. So with that in there, we now upgrade this. That leaves us with 65,000 remaining. It's a little bit down to the wire. No doubt about that. And the question is this enough? This doesn't get us into orbit. So we will require utilization of all of this. We do not have the Terrier yet. We still have the Pug only. So that's noted. We have about 2 tons to work with here. So, 2 tons. What is the mass of the flea? 1.5 tons? Well, that's awkward. As a hypothetical, what would this be in terms of thrust to weight? Yeah, that wouldn't lift it, just with the single flea. So, mass-wise, solid fuel boosters are not an option. We probably don't want to go with additional liquid fuel. How much tonnage would that take up? I mean, we could have a tiny amount. I definitely don't want to upgrade the launch pad. I don't think we even can at this moment. So, we do need to get this mission underway. I'm guessing we're going to be best off... Well, for one thing, this is 2 T100s. We should probably upgrade that to 2 T200s. That's slightly more cost efficient. So it'd be something like this. This is still underpowered. And that's mostly due to the swivel engine. My normal solution to this would be something like the following. We take some radial decouplers. We slap on some hammers. Or actually, I'd probably go with thumpers here. We slap on some thumpers and we call it a day. That would be the normal solution here. But this is, of course, putting us wildly over our mass. Solid fuel weighs a lot. So that's not really a great option. We don't have a lot of attempts to do this before we go bankrupt. We basically have to get this moon flyby. And, without getting additional... Yeah, without getting additional funding for upgrading our tracking and mission control, that's not impossible to get a moon encounter. We've done it before. It's not impossible, but it is difficult. So funds are going to be the primary constraint at this point, right? We need 150 and 75. So 225 to get these upgraded, which is the same amount as the VAB. Getting those done is a very high priority. Upgrading this launch pad will be a high priority as well. We definitely don't do that right now. So, what other contracts can we do? Well, let me just check in here. I will pause the recording, and I will be back after I've taken a look. Okay, so I took a look at the contracts. I didn't see anything that was super easy to do on our current technology. So I think we're probably going to avoid that for now. It is basically time to put a cut in here. So I think we're going to probably stop here for the moment. And we are going to be heading up to the moon, almost certainly, using the Stay Putnik in order to complete this exploration contract. So all we need to do for that is flying by the moon, gathering the scientific data from the moon, and returning from a flyby of the moon. And all we're interested in right now, for the record, it's not that there aren't good contracts being proposed. There are. But we don't have the ability to do them with our current funding level. So that's the primary issue at this moment. So I think what we're going to do here is we're going to go with the Stay Putnik. And we are going to... toss on, because we're going to have to bring this back, right? So we're going to toss on 2 drogue chutes, like this. and 2 radial mount parachutes, like this. So we're going to come back with something kind of along the lines of that. Now, the main problem is that attitude, right? For the purposes of this, I'm going to ditch the high gain antenna, and we are going to put a new antenna with, let's see here, what kind of rating do these have? Probably these are enough. We can put that antenna like right here, with the idea being that that communicates with Kerbin, and hopefully that means that we don't have that wacky offset thrust. Hopefully. We may want to offset this over here by tossing in a barometer, and we also may want to put in an experiment storage unit, because we're probably going to have, this is not going to be our full suite of science, right? But we're probably going to have enough to grab some additional science here. So we put in a barometer here, an experiment storage unit, and then the hemispherical liquid fuel tank, like that. It's definitely wacky looking, no doubt about that. And this is still going to be a slightly underpowered stage here. We do have a little bit of extra weight here, though, so I would like to think about putting in like a pair of radial decouplers, like this. And do we have enough weight to put in, say, a pair of hammers? Not quite. But we could put in a pair of fleas. Like that. Now, do we have... we don't have struts. So we're going to have to just go like this and hope that this is good enough. These fleas will burn out pretty quickly, right? So that's fine. 1.97, and then we do something like this. We would need to definitely rework our setup here. These are the parachutes, these are the drogues. So we would do something like this, and this would be the unmanned moon flyby. Okay. So this would be the idea, but we're going to have to do this without any sort of maneuvers, which is going to be interesting, for sure. Step 1 will be reaching a decent orbit of Kerbin. And then from there, we'll see how this goes. But it is time to put a cut in here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and next episode, we are going to fly this by the moon. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, James, Shadow Wolf, Emlohan80, Rogue Corvid, Kentogan, Spartan News, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Anna the Elephant, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.